Welcome back. This section of the PowerPoint presentation will focus on the domain of access and enrollment as one of the environmental challenges facing the Academy. As you can see on the slide, I have provided bullet points of those items that, from my perspective, define the environmental challenges within this domain of issues facing the Academy. As referenced in the prior lecture, the pressure for institutions historically and from a mission perspective to meet the access needs of our state are critical, but those access needs are becoming more complex as we serve an increasingly diverse and low-income demographic within the state of Tennessee. Our populations are shifting, and as a result, the tensions and pressures for us to meet that access mission are changing. But then for institutions such as ETSU, or on the other end of the state, Dyersburg State Community Colleges, our ability to serve rural populations presents a unique set of challenges and opportunities for us as we tailor programs to meet students from that demographic. The next bullet point references adults in the non-traditional challenge, from the Tennessee Reconnect to investments that are being made through the Drive to 55 program. We in the state of Tennessee and other states across the country are realizing that in order to hit their broad educational attainment goals, that they must enroll more non-traditional students. That being said, our focus remains primarily at universities on those students who are transitioning to college, those students who are moving through in that traditional 18 to 24 cohort. For our institution, more than half of the students who graduate each spring are the first in their family to receive a college degree. 47% of our undergraduate population receives some form of Pell or need-based financial aid. So even though it's 2016 and we've gone through a period of massification in our nation's system, the predominance of students who enroll in community colleges or at regional institutions such as ETSU remain the first in their family to embark upon that journey. But as they come to college, they and their peers, the millennium generation, have a different set of learning expectations, a different set of technology expertises than I had as an undergraduate student. When I was an undergraduate student at West Virginia University, the internet didn't exist. My faculty member would come in with chalk, would write on a board, would assign materials. We would return to class, submit those materials, and that was the semester. He had no idea if I was in class or not in class. Now, through the power of technology and D2L, we can track as faculty how long you are logged into the course, for how long you've watched this video. You may have already tuned me out, and the extent to which you are using technology to inform and infuse your learning experience at a doctoral level. That's magnified tenfold for undergraduate students, with an expectation that materials are online and immediately available 24/7 as they're working through their university experience or community college experience. The next bullet refers to high-impact populations within the funding formula. These are non-traditional students, adult students, low-income students, students of color. This aligns with the bullets from prior in the slide, but what makes this environmental threat unique to states such as Tennessee is that our ability to move those students successfully through their educational journey results in larger funding for our institutions. So not only do we have a moral imperative to ensure that these students have a successful experience at our institution, but we now are financially rewarded or penalized for our ability to meet those objectives. Many institutions, particularly universities, have moved purposefully to expand their market presence in out-of-state domains or internationally. While this may not be an area of market opportunity at the community college sector, as you step back and look nationally, universities, particularly flagships, the University of Alabama has grown by 16,000 students in a decade, done so primarily through a reliance upon out-of-state students. But across the board, universities are turning to new markets to help grow and maintain enrollments. With the advent of Promise, with the funding of lottery scholarships, institutions are looking to maximize the investments that states are making as they couple those with their access agendas. You are seeing universities across the nation, from Georgia, the home of the Hope Lottery Scholarship Program, to South Carolina, who has Merit Aid, the Palmetto Fellows, to their Life Scholarship Program, to Bright Futures in Florida, to TOPS in Louisiana, to Promise in West Virginia. Institutions are coupling their aid packages with the resources provided by their respective states to help meet their access goals. And then the final element on this slide talks about the increased competition from MOOCs, from for-profit institutions, and from the not-for-profit sector. Here in the state of Tennessee, we've seen the development of Western Governors as a recognized public institution. So as we strive to meet our access agenda, as we strive to maintain a base of enrollment across all of our respective institutions, our ability to maintain a base enrollment is increasingly complicated by the competitiveness that is defining the landscape. So a very brief overview of major environmental threats that are facing our institutions. These environmental threats will be explored in detail in the reading materials throughout the semester. I want to frame those comments within some data points that help to define the picture of enrollment shifts at a national level, a regional level, and at a state level. So the chart here in front of you outlines enrollment growth across the SREB states. SREB is the Southern Regional Education Board. During next week's section of the course, you'll read an article from the SREB that outlines their agenda and vision for the community colleges in the South. But you can see nationally, the nation's post-secondary system between 2008 and 13 grew about 4.8%. In the South, about a 10.8% growth across all the 16 member states of the SREB. You see in the state of Tennessee, a 9.9% growth. But in the majority of states, absent my former state of West Virginia, significant enrollment growth within the southern states. In terms of changes in enrollment, this is more short-term, 2011 to 2013. So the prior slide was 8 to 13, encapsulating the significant growth that occurred as a result of individuals returning to higher education for retooling and advanced skills and certification as a result of the Great Recession. Now, focusing on the last 2 years, you see a very different picture. Those individuals are now returning to the marketplace, returning to jobs, taking those skills that they gained from their time in post-secondary education, and as a result, minus Delaware, the majority of states in the SREB have witnessed enrollment declines from a statewide perspective. This chart provides an overview of enrollment growth within the state of Tennessee. It comes compliments of a good friend and colleague, Dr. Russ Deaton at the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. Dr. Deaton and his staff have plotted on a regression line enrollment growth within the state of Tennessee from 1979 to the present. You can see those fluctuations and shifts over time, but a trend line that moves upward, consistently upward from 79 to 2011. You can see that during periods of economic downturn, enrollment adjusts accordingly. As the economy improves, enrollment turns in the other direction. But even with the significant spike and downward flow as a result of the Great Recession, we still remain on the regression trend line as projected by Dr. Deaton and his staff. To dive in a level deeper, this chart provides an overview of total enrollment within the public institutions of the state of Tennessee from a headcount perspective and an FTE perspective. And FTE is full-time equivalents. So the headcount number includes part-time students. A student could be taking one course. They're included in the 225,000 number. The 170,000 number equates all of those students on a full-time equivalency level. This chart provides an overview of enrollment trends within the universities, and you can see across the institutions, most have either remained flat or experienced some form of downturn from 10 to 2015. This chart is census data for last year. I'm hopeful that as we move into the semester, particularly when we're together in Nashville, I'll be able to provide a deeper examination of enrollment trends for the current year. But this past year was a significant year from a policy perspective in the state because it was the first year in which students who were recipients of the Promise Scholarship were matriculating to those institutions that offered associate's degrees. And I preface that with those institutions that offer associate's degrees because there are two universities, Austin Peay and Tennessee State, that retain their portfolio of associate's degree programs. If you look at those two institutions, they are the only institutions in the Board of Regents system that recognized enrollment growth at the university level. What's interesting for me to note is that among the community colleges, even with the huge infusion of students via Promise, many Southwest, for example, continued the downward trend. Southwest would be an interesting case study for those of you who are looking at dissertation ideas throughout the course of this program. I would encourage you to go back and look at Southwest prior to its creation, when it was formerly the State Technical Institute at Memphis and Shelby State Community College. At one point, those two institutions separately had in excess of 16,000 students enrolled. And as you can see now, total enrollment for Southwest last year dropped below 10,000 students. So some unique things that are happening within the city of Memphis and that institution that are grounds and fertile grounds for future research and examination. In order to get a true sense of enrollment, particularly a true sense from the traditional frames of those students moving from high school on to post-secondary education, it's, I think, informative to examine the pipeline of students that are moving through our state's K-12 sector. As you can see on the slide here, there was a significant dip in the number of students who graduated from high school in the state of Tennessee. That trend line bottomed out in 13-14, and it has begun to uptick. By 2021, we'll have about an equivalent number of high school graduates to what we had in 2010 and 2011. So some of the decline in the number of students enrolled in our system could be a factor of simply less students graduating from high school. What will be interesting to track moving forward is as that trend line moves upward, the students who comprise that growth look very different demographically than the students who graduated from our state's secondary system in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. More diverse, more first-generation students, more Hispanic and Latina students, students who do not have the history of post-secondary access that they can rely upon from a familial perspective. So it's incumbent upon us as institutions, and you'll see this as you move through the Pasquarella and Terenzini work, to really spend intentional time developing, analyzing, implementing, and evaluating programs to serve a changing undergraduate student market. One thing that for me is really unique to note is the amount of students who are remaining in-state after they graduate from high school. One of the prescribed purposes of the Lottery Scholarship Program was to ensure that more Tennesseans would remain in-state to pursue post-secondary education. And you see prior to the Lottery Scholarship, about 81% of students enrolled in some form of post-secondary education in-state, and you see how those trend lines shift. But a pretty nice jump in terms of those students who went to college staying in-state as a result of the Lottery Scholarship. However, we were unable to significantly move the needle with respect to college-going rates, and that's where Promise is so important. Promise has, in many respects, changed the dinner table conversation across the state of Tennessee. Through the provision of last dollar scholarships, all Tennesseans have the opportunity to enroll in post-secondary education, and cost is no longer a factor. You see here a chart, once again, provided by friends and colleagues at the Tennessee Higher Education Commission, that shows the number of students last year who moved through that Promise pipeline. More than 16,291 students enrolled in the community colleges, TCATs, or in those universities that offer associate's programs last year. And you can see how that enrollment here on this chart really has impacted the distribution, the academic preparation, as well as the age of students who are enrolling at the community college sector. This will be a focus of one of the readings from SRAB, as well as a topic of conversation when we're together in Nashville, both in October as well as November. So I'd encourage you to spend some time with this data, and I'm hopeful that when we're together in the fall, I'll have some updated slides. You see here the real driving point there on the delta column to the former, on the far end. Significant enrollment growth in the community colleges, 20% enrollment growth in the TCATs, and then a decline in undergraduate enrollment at the universities and within the UT system. Here at ETSU, we estimate that Promise cost us about 10% of our freshman class. And as we move into the section on finance and the operational aspects of the institution, you'll really see the significance of that from a financial perspective on the universities. Yet one more chart that shows increases in enrollment, this time at the college level. You see a 74% increase at Motlow State, a 54% increase at Volunteer State, and overall a 25% rounding up increase across the Board of Regents system. Similar trends within the TCATs. Here's a slide for the universities. You see Austin P up. Knoxville's an anomaly. They have 17,000 applicants. Knoxville can kind of determine the size of their freshman class. But for the regional institutions, the size of that first-time enrollment, you see ETSU down 6.2%, Tennessee Tech down 18.1%. So Promise has redistributed the college choice patterns of students across the state, and we'll touch some on that later in the semester with respect to literature on the cooling out function of certain sectors of institutions. The next two slides for me are really powerful because it drives home why Promise has changed that dinner table conversation that I alluded to earlier. This slide shows the college going rate for the state of Tennessee in comparison to the other states in the union. You see the national average there in the red bar. The state of Tennessee is the green bar. That was pre-Promise. So pre-Promise and post-Promise. Post-Promise, you see the major jump that Tennessee made, a jump that is unprecedented in our nation's history of access opportunities, access-related scholarships. To move from right at the national average to significantly above the national average in 1 year really signifies the powerful impact that Tennessee Promise had on both the state as well as the students who comprise its post-secondary systems. I want to take a little bit of time to walk through this chart, and then we'll transition to the next section of the lecture. So this is the last slide that will review the environmental challenges related to access and affordability. And it's a slide that really ties everything together for me. When I was assistant chancellor in West Virginia, I used this data in a commencement address at a college of medicine. And you may ask, what in the world does pipeline data have to do with a commencement address at a college of medicine? What I was driving home for those individuals who were graduating from the West Virginia School of Osteopathic Medicine and moving into their profession after completion of the residency was to portray the significant role that they will play as leaders in their communities. As they meet with their patients, as they meet with family members, they are looked to be leaders within their community. They have an opportunity as a physician, particularly if they're working in rural areas, to talk about the powerful influence that post-secondary education has to transform lives, to share their personal stories. These four simple numbers, drive home not only the work that we're doing around access, but drive home the work that we have to do to move this needle. So within the state of Tennessee, for every 100 ninth graders, prior to Promise, 71 graduated from high school, 44 went on to college, and 19 graduated from college within the requisite 6-year year as defined by the Department of Education. 19 college graduates for every 100 ninth graders. Ladies and gentlemen, as I reflect upon this slide, as I reflect upon the portfolio of programs that are offered nationally, from Gear Up to TRIO to Talent Search, to early outreach and intervention programs, to early high schools that exist in many of the community colleges, to the university school that exists on our campus. Those are efforts that we make to move not only the 100 to 70 needle, but the 70 to 44 needle. It's that 44 to 19 point that's at the center of Complete College Tennessee. That's at the center of the new performance funding paradigm in the state. How can we ensure that those students who invest their resources in our institution have the opportunity to realize their dreams? Unless we're able to significantly move this number and or infuse additional adults into the marketplace, it will be impossible for us to meet the Governor's Drive to 55 objectives. We're going to talk more about this in subsequent readings in the course, but these series of slides frame the first environmental paradigm that impacts the nation's post-secondary system. That is the paradigm of access. And it's with that, I'll bring this section of the presentation to a close, and I look forward to having you join me for the next section of the presentation. Thanks.